Dad looked at me and coldly said, "You're still a nobody, just give up." I simply smiled and quietly left the room. A month later, he showed up at my office asking. I didn't flinch when he said it. He stood there in the dim light of the living room, arms folded like he was reviewing a soldier who'd just failed inspection. "You're still a nobody," he said, voice even, cold as a stone. "Just give up." I remember the way the silence stretched between us, thick with all the years that came before. All the times he'd brushed off my dreams with a grunt or a scoff. All the mornings he'd banged on my door at 5 a.m. because men don't sleep in. The nights he'd walked past my open laptop and muttered, "Waste of time. Go get a real job." My name is Ben. And I grew up in a house where love had conditions, and approval was doled out like ration meals. My father, Alan Harper, was the kind of man who believed a hard day's work only counted if you came home with dirt on your hands or grease on your clothes. Ex-Marine turned construction foreman. A man built out of concrete and rust. When I was 10, I showed him a comic I'd drawn. He glanced at it for 2 seconds before telling me it was for babies. At 15, I taught myself to code and built my first basic game on a beat-up Dell I'd bought with lawn mowing money. He called it a nerd's excuse to avoid real life. By the time I turned 22, I'd already stopped expecting anything from him. But I hadn't stopped hoping. Not really. That night, the night he called me a nobody, I had just finished showing him a beta version of the app I'd been working on for over a year. A design and productivity platform. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd see the potential. But he didn't even look up from the screen. "You wasting your time again?" he asked. I told him the beta had over 5,000 signups. That I had 2 potential investors waiting to schedule meetings. His eyes didn't budge. Then he said the line, "Still a nobody. Just give up." He didn't shout. He didn't sneer. Just said it like it was the weather. And you know what I did? I smiled. Not a smug smile. Not angry. Just calm. Like something inside me had finally snapped into place. "Okay," I said quietly. I closed my laptop, stood up, and walked out of the room. I didn't slam the door. I didn't say goodbye. But that night, I made myself a promise. If he was going to call me a nobody, then I'd show him what a nobody could become. The first sign that something was changing came 2 days after I walked out. I hadn't planned on returning to the apartment I shared with my old college roommate Jake, but when I stepped back into our small downtown space, something in me felt different. Lighter. Like I had finally put down a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying. Jake noticed it too. "Did something happen?" he asked, watching me as I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the code for my app. I nodded but didn't go into detail. The truth was still too fresh to explain. I didn't want to hear myself say it out loud, didn't want to admit how deeply it stung. I just said, "It's time." The app, Stackline, was a digital workspace I'd built for designers, freelancers, and remote teams. It merged beautiful UI with seamless project integration. Think Notion meets Figma, with a layer of AI-generated design suggestions baked in. I'd been tweaking it for over a year, sneaking in hours between contract gigs, coding on lunch breaks, pitching at meetups while pretending I was just networking. But now it wasn't just an idea I believed in. It was a lifeline. A line drawn in the sand. For the next 3 days, I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. Jake brought me coffee and takeout. I barely noticed. Every line of code was written with a fire I hadn't felt before. And then the emails started. The first was from a UI/UX YouTuber who had stumbled onto our beta via Reddit. He loved it. Said he'd be featuring it in his next Top 5 Indie Tools of the Month video. 12 hours later, our sign-up list doubled. By the end of the week, it had quadrupled. I watched the dashboard blink with live activity, new accounts being created, people uploading mock-ups, small teams sending feedback. Comments poured in. "Where has this been all my life? Is this open for investors? Please tell me this isn't going to be bought by some giant and ruined." I didn't even realize I was crying until Jake nudged me. Hey man, you okay? I wiped my face and laughed. Yeah. I think I'm finally okay. But it wasn't until I opened an email titled Partnership Opportunity, Urgent, that I realized just how fast things were moving. It was from a mid-sized tech firm, BrightArc. They wanted a call. Immediately. That night, I stared at my reflection in the window above the sink. Same tired eyes. Same worn hoodie. But something had changed. I no longer needed my father to believe in me. I just needed to prove that he was wrong. The deal closed on a Thursday afternoon. BrightArc offered a $1.2 million investment in exchange for 18% equity. It wasn't just money, it was validation. Their CTO called Stackline the most elegant tool we've seen in 5 years. Their legal team sent the paperwork that same night. Jake popped a bottle of cheap champagne from the corner store. I signed the contract with trembling fingers. But it wasn't the money that made my hands shake. It was the memory of that last conversation. After the deal was finalized, I went back and watched the security footage from my phone, just a personal thing I'd started doing in the office. There I was, pacing around the small, open space, talking to investors, writing code, answering support emails. Alive. Focused. And yet, for some reason, I couldn't get that moment with my father out of my head. The living room. The flickering light of the TV. The bitter scent of black coffee. You're still a nobody. Just give up. That line didn't hurt me anymore. Not like it used to. But I kept replaying it. Not because I believed it, but because of the look in his eyes when he said it. He wasn't angry. He was empty. Like something had already died in him a long time ago, and I was just the unlucky soul who reminded him of what he lost. That night, I opened a message he had sent me days earlier. I hadn't seen it until now, somewhere buried under notifications and onboarding emails. It was short. Almost clipped. Saw your thing online. Can't say I get it. But it's something, I guess. Dad? I didn't respond. Instead, I went for a walk. My apartment was quiet when I returned. I stood by the window, looking down at the streetlights glowing like constellations in the concrete below. I thought about the time he caught me drawing superheroes on my math homework and tore it in half. You want to live in fantasy worlds your whole life? I thought about the job offer I turned down 3 years ago, a cushy role at a software firm he approved of. He had smiled, the only time I ever saw him do so when I brought up work. Now that's something respectable. When I declined the offer to build my own thing, he didn't speak to me for a month. This was never just about the app. Or coding. Or design. It was about him needing me to live the life he couldn't finish. But I wasn't going to be a placeholder for his failure. That Thursday night, I finally typed a response. You were wrong. And I'm okay with that. Then I hit send. The next morning, I didn't check for a reply. I got up early, earlier than usual. Showered. Put on the one blazer I owned. It still had the dry cleaner's tag on it from 2 years ago. I remember buying it for interviews I never got. Funny how that works. Jake was already in the office when I got there. He looked up from his desk, eyes wide. Did you sleep? I smiled. Not really. The office was no longer just our shared co-working rental. We'd moved up. BrightArc's investment let us lease a proper space, clean, modern, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a modest view of the skyline. Our logo, freshly printed, hung behind the reception desk, Stackline in bold gray letters, the icon a minimalist line layered in 3 sharp arcs. I walked through the space slowly, like I was seeing it for the first time. There were 10 new hires already working, developers, designers, a community manager, even a client success lead named Kara who sent me morning reports before I was fully awake. But the best part? People believed in it. They believed in me. Not because of a title or a name, but because they used the thing I built, and it made their lives easier. I'd watch freelancers on YouTube casually mention it. I'd see small businesses tweeting screenshots of their projects. It was happening. The old me, the boy who used to eavesdrop on his father telling friends he had 2 kids that did something and one that just plays on the computer, was gone. replaced by someone who didn't need validation anymore. Still, I kept working like I had something to prove. Every update was personal. Every client success was another brick in the wall between me and the man who thought I'd never be anything. I poured myself into the platform. I made it faster, more beautiful, more seamless. I said yes to late calls with overseas users. I said no to acquisition offers that dangled cash with hidden control. Jake joked once that I was working like I was trying to win a race no one else was running. He didn't know I was chasing a ghost. But the most important decision I made during that time wasn't about code, or design, or business. It was this. I decided to stop waiting. Waiting for my father to call. Waiting for him to say he was wrong. Waiting for an apology. None of that was coming. And that was okay. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing his version of success. I was living mine. It was a Monday. I remember because Mondays usually buzz with energy. New users, investor check-ins, the engineering team huddling around whiteboards with coffee that smelled like burned hope. But that morning was different. Kara, our front desk lead, buzzed in on the intercom with a hesitant voice. "Ben, there's someone here to see you." "No appointment." "Says he's your father?" I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, frozen, hands still on my coffee cup. Something tightened in my chest, something old and familiar, like a child reaching for the stove after being told not to. "I'll be right there," I said. I took the elevator down to the lobby. It was sleek, cold marble, brushed steel, echoey with footsteps. I stepped around the corner, and there he was. Alan Harper. My father stood near the reception desk, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. He wore his old army green jacket, frayed at the cuffs, zippered halfway, same one I remembered from every fishing trip we never actually went on. His jeans were worn at the knees, his shoes cheap and cracked. He looked smaller somehow, like someone had taken the man I grew up with and turned the volume down. His eyes flicked up when he saw me. "Ben." Just that. No smile. No outstretched hand. Just a tired voice and a name. I didn't say anything. We stood there in silence while the receptionist eyed us curiously. I finally nodded toward the hallway. "We can talk in here." He followed me down the corridor and into a small, empty meeting room, glass walls, clean table, 2 chairs. He sat stiffly, as if unsure whether he was welcome or not. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't think you'd ask," I replied. He looked around the office, trying to pretend he wasn't impressed. But he was. I saw the way his eyes lingered on the hardware, the crisp lines of the logo on the wall. "This yours?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Yeah," I said. "All of it." A long pause. Then he cleared his throat. I need a favor." Of course. Of course he did. He couldn't look me in the eye when he said it. He kept glancing down at the table, running his finger along the grain in small, nervous circles. The silence between us stretched long enough to make the glass walls hum. "I got laid off a few months back," he finally said. "Construction firm downsized. I was too expensive to keep on." I just listened. No pity. No judgment. Just watched as the man who once told me, "Real men don't make excuses," tried to lace his own together. He rubbed his palms together. "I burned through my savings quicker than I thought. You know how it is, medical bills, car trouble. Things pile up." I kept my arms folded. He went on. "I tried to get back in. Filed resumes, made calls. No one's hiring a guy like me. Not anymore." Then he exhaled, one long, shaky breath. "I heard about what you built. What you did. Thought maybe you could help. A loan, maybe a short-term position? I can do whatever, admin, maintenance, driving. Anything, really." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because just a month ago, this man looked me dead in the eye and told me I was nothing. Now he was sitting in a glass-walled office I paid for, in a building I leased, surrounded by people who respected me, asking for my help. I leaned forward slightly. So now you want something from a nobody? He froze. I saw the words hit him. Like they echoed in his chest, the same way they did in mine that night. He looked down. Then up. His eyes were tired. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said. Calm. Flat. You meant every word. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I stood up. Straightened my jacket. Walked to the door. Ben! But I didn't turn around. I reached for the handle, paused just long enough to say, You don't get to rewrite the story just because you don't like the ending. Then I walked out. Left him in that chair. Left him sitting in the silence he used to punish me with. He didn't follow me. Didn't call after me. Didn't pound the glass or beg. Just sat there, still as a monument, hands folded, shoulders curled forward, not from age, but from weight. The kind of weight you carry when you finally realize the bridges you burned weren't just temporary crossings. They were the only roads left. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. But I didn't work. I just sat there, staring at my reflection in the black screen. Part of me expected the guilt to come rushing in. That old, buried instinct, the one that told me I was only worth something when I was making someone else proud. I waited for it. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt clean. Like I had finally shut a window that had been letting in cold air for years. Jake knocked gently and poked his head in. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. He hesitated. Was that really your dad? I nodded again. Jake stepped inside, shut the door, and sat down across from me like he'd been waiting for this day too. You didn't owe him anything, you know. I know. But it still stings. I smiled, small, tired. It does. Just not the way he probably expected. The next day, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. Sloppy handwriting on a folded sheet of lined paper. My name written with a shaky hand. No return address. It said, I don't know who I am without control. I thought pushing you would make you strong. I didn't see I was just making you disappear. I'm sorry I couldn't be more. I'm proud of what you've done. I always was. I just didn't know how to say it. Dad. I folded the letter once. Then again. I didn't cry. I didn't reply. But I kept it. Tucked in the back of a drawer I never open unless I need to remind myself of who I used to be. It's strange how quickly life moves when you finally stop dragging the weight of someone else's expectations behind you. In the weeks that followed his visit, things didn't fall apart. I didn't spiral. The sky didn't crack open and drop guilt on my shoulders like it used to when I defied him. Instead, things flourished. Stackline was growing faster than we could keep up. We onboarded our 100,000th user. Companies started approaching us to integrate their tools into our platform. I hired my first executive team. There were weeks where I didn't write a single line of code, and it terrified me at first, until I realized it was because I was building something even bigger now. Not just a product. A legacy. Some nights, I'd sit alone in the office long after the team had left, looking out over the city lights, watching the traffic like blood pumping through a living thing. I'd think about how many years I spent trying to impress a man who thought success only wore one face: blue collar, calloused hands, a 6 a.m. alarm, and absolute obedience. Anything else was soft. Weak. Unworthy. But the truth was, my success didn't look like his, and that didn't make it any less real. I wasn't the nothing he believed I was. I wasn't the dreamer wasting time on a laptop. I was the founder of a company that employed 32 people. That gave interns a shot when no one else would. That helped a single mom in Indiana land freelance clients from Berlin to Sao Paulo. That helped a burnout architect finally design her own studio because our apps saved her time. I built something from nothing. And what's more, I did it without him. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me free. I started sleeping better. Laughing more. Saying yes to things I used to avoid. I reconnected with an old friend from college, Maya, someone who had always believed in me before I believed in myself. We started getting coffee, then dinner, then something more. She didn't care about the company. She cared about the person who built it. And for the first time, I let someone love that version of me, the one who wasn't trying to fix his father's story. One night, over dinner at a little place on the east side, Maya asked, "Do you think he ever really knew you?" I shook my head slowly. "No. I don't think he ever really tried." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "Then maybe it's time you stopped trying to be someone for him. You already became someone for you." That landed deeper than I expected. And maybe that was the final shift, not the success, not the office, not the money, but realizing that I didn't need his voice in my head anymore. I didn't need the ghost of his approval haunting every win. I didn't need to prove him wrong. I already had. And I had nothing left to prove. 3 months passed. Then 4. I never heard from him again, not a call, not a knock at the door. Just that letter, still folded in the drawer beside my desk like a message in a bottle from a man who never learned how to swim in his own emotions. And I never replied? Not because I hated him, but because there was nothing left to say. We were strangers now, tied together by blood and memory, but nothing else. I didn't need closure in the way I used to. His silence wasn't a wound anymore. It was a decision I had outgrown. Still, one rainy Sunday, I found myself back at the old house. The one I grew up in. It was on my way home from a speaking engagement, my first real keynote, if you can believe it. A tech summit downtown. I stood on stage and told a room of 2,000 people about resilience, innovation, and the danger of mistaking silence for humility. I said things I wished I'd heard when I was 20. When I was 10. When I was staring at my father's back, waiting for a nod that never came. And afterward, I didn't even realize I was driving past the old neighborhood until the streets started looking familiar. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The grass overgrown. A shutter hanging loose. That rusted truck still in the driveway, hood open like a mouth frozen mid-scream. I parked across the street and just sat there. Watching. He wasn't outside. But the porch light was on. Faint. Flickering. I thought about walking up to the door. Ringing the bell. Giving him the speech I never gave. But what would be the point? The speech wasn't for him anymore. It never was. So instead, I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a pen and paper from my travel notebook. I wrote a single sentence. "I forgive you." I didn't sign it. I didn't explain. I just folded it, walked across the street, and slipped it through the mail slot. No knock. No doorbell. Just that. Then I walked back to the car, drove away, and didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not once.